It was a day like no other.
It's okay. Also, some annoying problems in the house which can be avoided during construction.
You can have fun with salads in the hot weather. I'll show you some new ideas later.
The latest in home security devices, and look, no wires, so it's easy to install.
Weekender.
Live around Australia and a sporty edition of The Weekender.
Thanks, Doug, and welcome to The Weekender. Tonight we'll include the running of the Harold Park Miracle Mile, and that's at Sydney's Harold Park Paceway. We'll just cross to Doug Morrow for a brief preview.
Thanks, Sandra, and welcome to Harold Park. Well, a delightful night in the end this afternoon with those big black clouds hanging overhead. It looked as if, well, we might get some rain during the evening, but a big crowd's built up, the rain stayed away, and at the moment it looks as if we might even get a few stars twinkling for the running of this year's Miracle Mile. Of course, earlier today we heard of the scratching of Bill's student. He has a virus number 4, which means that the Queenslander Lindy's Nymph now gets the run, and she'll start from barrier 6, owned incidentally by Russ Hinds. Paleface Bubble will start from 4, and Glenn's Thunder will now come in and start from 5. The favourite, as expected, is number 1 Village Kid from Western Australia, and he's in tip-top form for this big race, and I think that he'll go very close to winning it. Well, as I said, a carnival atmosphere, a really electric atmosphere out here at the moment. Some of the people even enjoying the festivities of a picnic in the park. Others, of course, just enjoying the various frivolities that go on a night like this. Bands playing, everything going as you'd normally expect on an enjoyable evening. Now back to you, Sandra.
Thanks, David. To accommodate the running of the Miracle Mile, the program will be just a little bit longer tonight, but as well, our regular features. We'll visit a garden in Melbourne, and Brian will also visit a home to demonstrate for you the new do-it-yourself security lock-up systems.
The Weekender team have been heartened. In fact, we've absolutely been amazed. The response from you right around Australia has been overwhelming. Thousands of letters and calls have come in, and we're just quite dumbfounded. We appreciate those calls very, very much, and I can assure you we'll get back and answer all of them. We've had a lot come in, and there are a lot still coming in tonight, and we'll endeavour to answer that complete flood of inquiries that we've had. Some of those questions have been comments about the show, and others having suggestions. Thank you very much to all of you that have rung through and taken the time to write. If you'd like to ring through tonight, the number is 02 437 9008. And we'll certainly get through and answer as many of those calls live later on the show tonight. Talking about the program tonight, well, we do have a problem, and of course our problem is Bob Ryan. Bob's main problem is trying to get those big, lumpy things into the studio. Well, he's been out during the week and he's filmed this segment.
You know, now I know what it feels like to be a doctor at a party, because as a building specialist, I'm continually beleaguered by people who want to tell me their problems when they meet me. And whether you've got a new house or an old house, it doesn't matter. Everyone seems to have problems with their homes. But you know, they're so easy to fix if you can catch them at the beginning. For example, we look at this building under construction, you can see what I mean. Lots of people have trouble with pipes that go clunk in the night, and the cause is probably this. These copper saddles are supposed to hold the pipe into place. Unfortunately, they're often put on with iron nails, which eventually will rust out and cause the pipes to rattle. Listen to this. Can you hear that? That's the sort of problem you get when the saddle falls off and there's no saddle there. Another problem you get, which is easy to fix at this stage, is the window flashing. What's supposed to happen here is that when the brick wall comes up, that is sandwiched between the two, so that rainwater, which will get through the brickwork, is deflected off that and it falls outwards away from the house, not into the house. However, sometimes you get defects in the flashing like this, and that's got to be replaced. That's not going to do any good at all. And they're the kinds of things that you can very soon see when you look at a house under construction and have them fixed before they cause you problems. The problem with rattling pipes is going to be nothing more than a nuisance. The problem with bad window flashing is going to be a bit more serious because water is going to get inside the house and start doing some damage. But the most serious problem of all that many householders have to put up with is a leaky shower recess. I'm in a leaky shower recess now, or a shower recess with a leak waiting to happen. You see, what I've discovered here is that these walls aren't joined together with a piece of metal strip. That should be behind there, or something quite like that, should be behind there before that goes on. Over the top of that will go a piece of flashing which will keep the water out, but the important thing is, considering the contractions and expansions that take place in a shower recess, the two pieces of timber on either side of there should be tied together very tightly so that they can't come apart. Now, the difficulty is that if you don't do that, you're going to have enormous problems later. I mean, the carpet's going to be ruined, the whole shower's going to be ruined, tiles will fall off the wall, and it'll be a tremendous expense. And yet it's so easy to do it right now, because all you need to do now is, in this case, just remove that and put this on, and that's very cheap. But better still, if you can get to your house before this happens, you can tell your builder that you're not going to accept it like that, and you want it done the right way. It's interesting that builders don't do this, because I don't blame them in some respects. I don't think they're trying to cheat. I mean, this costs nothing, this sort of strip. But they probably don't know. So in case they don't do any of the reading of their trade literature, might I suggest that you find out a bit for yourself and look after your own building. I love prowling around building sites. This is a double brick or full brick home, and it's typically better than your timber framed home. But there's always a few things that you need to look out for. In this case, this doorway I'm standing in, the frame hasn't been protected against the ravages of the weather. It ought to have had some pink primer on before it was put up. What's going to happen here is the rain's going to get in there, swell up the door frame, and the poor owner's going to have problems opening and closing the door. So if you thought you'd get over your troubles with timber by having an aluminium window frame or door frame like this, there are problems here too, or there can be unless you're very careful. This particular crowd of brickies are being very good. They've taken their care not to get this too dirty. Nice and clean there, once you brush that off. You see, the problem is, if mortar drops on here while the brickwork's going on, this is going to cause the door to jam and squeak and cause all sorts of nasties. Eventually, it might even mean that the frame will have to come out and be done again. Now, once they get up a bit higher, with that, they'll put this plastic cover over, like so. So any mortar droppings are going to fall down there. If all this intimidates you, don't be surprised. It intimidates me as well, and I'm supposed to be good at the job. But the thing is, you can buy plenty of books on the subject, you can talk to your architect, an architect will do all this for you if you wish, and it'll cost you about
decrease, partly due to electronic devices like this, and partly due to cooperation with good neighbour programs with the police force. Now, the most important thing about an alarm system, and the reason why most people don't install a do-it-yourself alarm system, is that they believe that there's a lot of wires and there's a lot of hassle and a lot of electronic knowledge needed. No longer true. What has been released is an exciting new product that has a sensor the same as any other type of burglar alarm. It's an infrared sensor that senses body heat within a room. But the reason that it's different is that there is no wires. And that's the reason why. There is an infrared sensor which senses bodies in the room, but there's also a little FM wireless transmitter. And that transmits a signal back here to the microprocessor or to the central control unit, eliminating totally the need for wires. This then triggers the alarm and makes a lot of noise and lets the police or your neighbours know that somebody is robbing your house or somebody has broken in. But one of the most important things about establishing an alarm is knowing where to put the sensor. Where do you mount it so that it's going to have the best possible task and do the job properly? Well, in our house here at the Weekender, we've got a busy area along the front here, and that busy area is where anybody who's coming in and out is going to have to walk at one stage or another. So we'll mount the sensor in such a way that it best protects that busy area. And there's the sensor, and it's doing nothing more than protecting this area, looking out over the busy parts where people go walking and therefore where intruders might be. Now, just to make sure that this is the right technique, what we've done is we've got a CBAC link at the moment with Berry in Sydney. We can't say any more because this is a security story. And Berry, good evening to you.
Hello, Brian. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Now, you're standing, I believe, I've got a rough sketch plan of your house here, and you're standing, I believe, in the largest room of the house. I wonder if you could show me where the main entrances to that room are so that I can make some sort of assessment as to how we're going to put an alarm and best protect that place.
Great. Well, I've got the front door here where I come in, and most everybody comes in.
Right.
I've got 2 doors there leading to a courtyard, which are sometimes open.
Yeah.
I've got a kitchen door that goes out the back.
Right.
And the traffic.
Oh, just a moment there. Now, Dennis is our cameraman. Dennis, there's a staircase there. I can see that leads to an upstairs part of the townhouse.
Yes, I forgot about that. The staircase leads to the bedrooms and the bathroom.
Righty-ho.
Just straight up there.
And the kitchen, Dennis?
And then the kitchen is just out here, and most of the traffic would come through the kitchen to the stairwell.
Right, so that's an ideal room, actually, to fit the alarm sensor, because you've got people who come in through the front door, in from the garden, down from upstairs, and in from the kitchen. Yeah, that's very interesting. Now, Dennis, if you take a step backwards just a little, you should find yourself closing up towards the wall. Am I right?
Yes, I'm up against the wall now, Brian.
Okay, fine. Now, if you can pull your lens back really very wide and then swing it from left to right, we can see the room from one end to the other. Right, that's the garden out through the curtains.
Yes, out there.
Fine. And swinging it back around to your right, Dennis. The staircase leading upstairs. Oh, good heavens, there's a picture of the Weekender on your television set. Keep going now, Dennis, to the right. And is that a laundry, that small door in the back there?
That's a laundry door, but it has no external to it.
Right, that's fine. That's a secure room then. And there's your kitchen.
Yes.
Okay, well now the correct position, as the sensor is a passive sensor in that it sits there looking into the room to spot somebody, then the correct place for that sensor would be straight over the top of Dennis's head, but don't stand on his shoulders to put it up there.
All right, how about that?
That's fine. Now, is there anything you'd want to know about fitting this type of system?
Well, look, I'm not too good on nuts and bolts, so how am I going to fix it onto the wall?
Well, if you're having a look at the little set there before, you'd have seen that all I used was double-sided sellotape, and I stuck it up there.
Really?
That's
Fabulous.
all it needs.
Now, what about, well, let's be honest, how much is it going to cost me?
This sort of unit sells for about $350, and it includes something that I think might interest you. If you want to protect the upstairs, then what you take is this device, which sits beside your bed, and it has a panic button that you hit if you can hear somebody in the house and you want to trigger off the alarm.
Well, that's fabulous. That's really great.
Is there anything else you wanted to know?
Oh, yes. Now, what about cats and dogs? Because I do sometimes get them coming in and out, you know?
Right. Well, the sensitivity is adjustable, so you can, in fact, turn it down a bit if it does false alarm. And you should let your neighbours know, because if you let your neighbours know, then they're going to be good neighbours to you. If they hear the alarm, they're going to notify the police. Thanks very much indeed,
Thanks,
Barry.
Brian,
That's
for
all
your
we've
help.
got time for. And remember, with technology like this, you really don't have to panic.
Now, with some handy hints and ideas for African violets, here's Sandra Ross.
Thanks, Doug. I wonder how often it is that you've either bought or been given an African violet in full flower, just like that one, beautiful, and then in a matter of only maybe 3 weeks, it's looking like this, with absolutely no flowers on it. It really is very disappointing, but there's a lot you can do. African violets are very shy flowering plants, and it really is a question of light. If your violet is just sitting there maybe on a little coffee table and not flowering, move it around the house to a spot that gets plenty of bright light. The ideal spot, if you can find a north-facing window with a little windowsill and perhaps the sunlight just filtered through a curtain, that's the ideal spot for an African violet. If you can find that spot, just experiment around your house with the different windows and see if you, by giving the plant more light, you can encourage it back into good flowers. However, if you've decided that you've experimented with all those spots and you just can't get that violet to flower, you may need to resort to one of these. Now, this is a special stand fitted with a fluorescent tube. This is a special fluorescent tube here with a Grow Lux light in it. Now, that special light will encourage all those violets, and there's a whole host of beautiful varieties there, and that will encourage them both into growth and into flower. Whatever that light's on, they'll stay flowering. So maybe that's the secret for you, to keep them growing and keep them flowering. Invest in one of these Grow Lux tubes, and you can, well, I've got quite a few, maybe 20 or so little violets there in that stand, and they really do look pretty. So maybe that's the way to go. Another little tip about African violets. Watering is sometimes a problem. We get lots of questions about how do I water them. Always put the water in the tray, in a little saucer in the tray. Now, this is an empty pot. It does have a wick in it, this pot. It has a little wick coming through the base there, and then it goes right up through the plant so that it takes the water from the base, from the pot here, and the nutrient that I've added to the water, and it goes right up through the plant. So by that way, the plant only receives as much water as it needs. It's really very simple. So what you do is you buy a special African violet fertiliser, you add a couple of drops to the water, however many it tells you on the pack, and then you just put the water into the reservoir and keep that reservoir topped up at all times. And that way, the plant will just take up as much water as it needs, and you'll never overwater it. Never, ever add the water to the top of the pot, because that really is dangerous, and that way you can cause lots of problems. So that's this African violet story. Let's hope that gets that African violet sitting there not flowering back into flower for you. Last week, we had lots of inquiries about our seaback segment that came from Melbourne, that pretty cottage garden of Sue Fisher's. People wanted to know about cottage gardens and cottage plants and how you start a cottage garden, particularly if you're renovating an old house or an old garden. I thought I'd bring some cottage plants into the studio. I've got them out here on the veranda. Let's go and look at them. Cottage plants are just lovely. They really are my favourites. They're soft, pretty, graceful, informal plants. And you can just very easily plant a whole array of these pretty flowers, and they give you that informal look to a garden. Because what happens is the seeds germinate, they grow and flower, the flower seeds, the seeds spread around, the plants die, and then they pop up in other little areas of the garden. So all the time a cottage garden changes, and that's the charm of it. It's a constantly changing garden with different flowers coming, so that every day when you walk outside, something new, some other little flower is just popping out to greet you. They have a charm of its own. They're really lovely. Maybe my favourite is this dear little columbine. I really do love it. Its old-fashioned name is Granny's Bonnet, and isn't it gorgeous? If you'd like an easy way to start, maybe how to start a cottage garden, there are a couple of seed ranges that you might like to start with. Colonial Garden Collection, and all you do is just spread the seed around. They'll germinate exactly where it lands, and that really is an easy way. And the other way, Cottage Garden Favourites, a whole host of little cottage flowers. So give it a go. You really won't be disappointed.
Good, Sandra. Now here's Graham Ross.
Thanks a lot, Doug, and thank you, Sandra. Beautiful cottage plants. I guess gardens mean different things to different people. The cottage garden is a free-flowing, natural garden of, I guess, very changing dimensions. But there are lots of other types of gardens. Tonight, we're going down to Melbourne to look at a garden that's maybe just a little bit more formal. Certainly a beautiful garden, one of the most magnificent gardens, I think, that exists in Victoria, the Garden State. And our host down there is a very well-known gardener from Victoria, Neil Williams. Good evening, Neil. Just whereabouts are you in the garden there?
Well, Graham, at the moment I'm standing in the middle of an area which is right at the back of the garden, the place where the nursery rhymes would tell us the fairies live. We're short of fairies tonight. I don't think we have any here, but what we do have is a courtyard garden which surrounds me. Not a courtyard in the traditional sense of a paved area, but as you can see, a grassed courtyard, and it's enclosed by fairly high fences. I thought, Graham, if we could perhaps take the viewers for just a look around this area. It's one that's often overlooked in the home garden. Sometimes it's the place where you store the old bottles or the bikes. When I was a kid, it was the place where the chook house was located, and perhaps a couple of fruit trees and some vegetables. But it doesn't have to be an overlooked area. And I thought if we had a look around, perhaps some of the viewers might get some ideas about what they could do in their own garden. I talked about the fact that this is not a paved courtyard, and if we can just take a look at this, you can see quite obviously that it's a grassed area. You can also see that it has some very obvious walkways through it. Because it's at the back of the garden, we're obviously in the area of utilities, the place where you store those things that don't really need to be on show all the time. And if we can just walk this way and follow this particular pathway here, this one leads to an area, and I think this is probably quite a nice idea. If we can look in here at that particular section of the fence which is a let-in to the garden, behind that we've got the compost bins, potting soils, all those pots that you don't know where to put. In this particular case, the filtration equipment for the pool, which is away to my right, and that encloses all of that and still gives a fairly neat appearance, and then that can be topped off with plants. Okay, if we look at another section, and if we can follow this pathway back again, we come to this one here, and I said before that we have a sense of seclusion in the garden. Perhaps if we can walk in here, you might see what I'm talking about. And if we can go up this step, I'm sorry to turn my back on the camera, but if we can come right into this area, and here we have that part of the quiet garden. I'll just relax here for a minute on this little contemplation seat, because one of the things that I think is important in the garden is to have a quiet place that you can get away. It's a darn good place to have a drink at the end of the day, but it's also a place that you can contemplate the garden, or you can just simply relax. And I think that's something that perhaps some of us don't do quite enough of in the garden. Okay, well, I guess we can't sit here all night.
The garden,
sorry?
From where you are on that contemplation seat,
yeah.
I guess that's one of the great aspects of gardens, because it does give you the opportunity to reflect back over the day and I guess stop and enjoy the beauty that you've created there.
It does exactly that, Graham, and I think it's very important, and I'd like to think that any of the viewers who are watching might think along the same lines themselves. Okay, let's continue if we can. We've got one last area here, this particular one. Fairly logically, that leads away to the area where we store the garden tools and the barrow and the mulcher and such things. But alongside this area, we have in here a white garden. Now, this is something that it's not a new idea at all, originating in England a long time ago, but this is an area where all of the plants give us a succession of bloom in the colour white. And there's some nice plants in there. We haven't got time to talk about them all, but the important thing is that right through from spring, through summer, autumn into winter, there'll always be something flowering white. Just to give you a bit of an idea of the area that we're actually standing in, I'm now looking to the west, and you can see the courtyard effect from the brush fence, and we're looking at that at the moment. I'm now walking to the south, and as we come down here, you can see this lovely green beach, Fagus sylvatica, in front of us. But once again, you can see the screen fence at the back, and that's the south. And to the east, just as we look here, this is an area where we let the morning sun come into the garden, which I think is important if you like to have breakfast out in the garden. The very obvious blue spruce is one of the plants here that gives some character to the garden. Here's a nice one, Graham. An Australian native plant, Agonis flexuosa variegata.
We're starting to run out of time, unfortunately, Neil, as we're getting into those beautiful plants. But thanks very much for showing us your garden, just a glimpse of the courtyard there. And I know a lot of our viewers will be very interested in getting the names of some of those plants, which, of course, we can always give them later on in the show, and, of course, with calls coming in.
Perhaps we can follow up on that, Graham.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
Now, Doug's found a householder who's achieved that sanctuary in a completely different fashion.
For a growing number of folk, electric burglar alarms and barred windows are just not enough. Big savage dogs are now becoming very trendy. But what if your estate is small and your taste runs to a friendly pint-sized pooch? No problem. Now you can educate your mutt to double as a watchdog. Special types of canine schools for reprogramming. I'm told the mistress here has done just that. Benji was a lazy softie. Then a spate of break-ins convinced Laura McKinley it was time to beef up her defences, to augment her electronic surveillance, some special schooling and exercise, and now there's some newfound kill in Benji's temperament. This newly acquired role has not destabilised Benji's personality, I hope. Come here, Benji. Well, as you can see, he still likes a cuddle as well as a scrap. Now he's a pal as well as a worker. There's still a little bit of noticeable anxiety, though. You see, Benji has yet to claim his first scalp.
Looks like those yabbies are trying to get into a high fibre diet salad tonight. I wonder if they're going to really enjoy that salad. I do. I love salads. It's one of my very favorite meals, and it's strange because a lot of people think salads are only raw foods, but I like raw and cooked foods together. And so tonight we have pasta. Raw foods help to cleanse the body, and cooked foods are body builders. So why not combine the two of them? Raw foods accelerate metabolism and help to get rid of those stored toxins that we might have. And most societies today have accumulated a lot of toxins in the body. And so there's a swing, and the swing is towards more raw foods, juices, salads, anything that people can just lightly cook. And now, why don't we have a look at the salad that we're going to prepare tonight? First, we're going to see that we're going to be using wholemeal pasta. We have wholemeal and wholemeal with red peppers and wholemeal with spinach. And these have natural colorings in them, no artificial colorings at all. They're made from dehydrated vegetables. And then we have a mixture of vegetables. Any vegetables will do. I've cooked some, and some I've left raw, because when you just lightly blanch them, the color comes up, and then you rinse them in cold water, and the color stays, and it's really nice to have a beautiful salad, as you saw before. And now for our dressing. We have 2 dressings for tonight. Of course, we're only going to be using one at a time. One you can keep in the refrigerator for as long as 3 to 4 weeks. And if you keep it in a glass container and not in plastic, it will stay fresh for that long. And first, I'd like to show you how I do my garlic. Garlic is an additive to the salad dressing. So we have a clove of garlic here, and I'm going to smash it. And by doing that, I am allowing it to release itself very easily from the skin. And then I press the garlic into the brown paper. And it's the brown paper that is not shiny. And by doing that, you release the oil into the brown paper, which sometimes affects our digestion and can give us a little tiny bit of heartburn. And it really is more comfortable if, when using raw garlic, we use it this way. And so now for the salad dressing. We have some tofu. I'm going to put everything into the processor. This is soybean cheese, if you've not been familiar with it before.